Every morning, before the sun had even begun to peek over the distant Oregon mountains, the young woman in the red apron quietly knelt beside the old man. She placed a warm, freshly baked bread roll into his trembling hands, her gesture gentle and without hesitation. Did she ever wonder where he came from? Or why his eyes carried the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights, so tired yet so watchful? No. She never asked. No questions. No conditions. Just a simple act of kindness repeated day after day. But on the 11th morning, everything changed. Out of nowhere, four black military SUVs pulled up in perfect formation right outside the bakery. The engine hum stopped abruptly. A uniformed officer stepped out holding a letter, and in that instant, the entire bakery fell silent. The air thickened with anticipation as the woman in the red apron walked out, and every single person inside stood in respect. Welcome to this story of heartfelt gratitude stories, a story where quiet compassion blossoms into something extraordinary. Let's dive into what really happened. On the dusty corner of Santa Isabel, New Mexico, mornings always started with the unmistakable, comforting scent drifting from Rosie's Bakery. Nestled between an old pawn shop and a vacant gas station, the air was heavy with the warm notes of melting butter, vanilla, and rising bread dough, smells that wrapped the town like a cozy blanket. Marisol Rivera, 35, was the heartbeat of this bakery. She had never left her small town for more than a weekend in her entire life. And every day, long before the first light of dawn touched the Oregon peaks, she was already hard at work. Rolling dough, shaping perfect bagels, baking honey-sweet muffins, and preparing those legendary cheddar rolls locals couldn't get enough of. Her hands moved with purpose, yet without showiness. She didn't laugh loudly or linger after her shifts. Instead, she remembered things no one else did, the birthdays no one mentioned, the subtle preferences of her customers, who liked more sugar and who just wanted quiet. And then, there was the old man. The one person Marisol noticed when no one else did. His silver hair matted under a worn cap, a frayed and dust-covered coat draped over his thin frame. He sat quietly every morning at exactly 6:10 a.m. on the bench by the recycling bins, like clockwork. Every single day. Without fail. He never asked for anything. Just sat there, shoulders slightly hunched, as if trying to make himself smaller, almost invisible. But his eyes, oh, those eyes. They were far from vacant, they were alert, watchful, carrying the heavy armor of years spent guarding himself against the world. Marisol thought maybe he was waiting for someone, but days turned to weeks, and still, he never left the bench without a pause. No words. No greetings. Just that silent presence. Yet, every morning, as she swept the back patio before opening the bakery doors, he would offer her a slight nod, quiet, simple, yet somehow profound. Nothing more. Nothing less. Then, one cold Tuesday morning, when frost still clung to the windows like fragile glass ornaments, Marisol stepped outside holding a brown paper bag filled with leftovers, a ham sandwich, a banana muffin, and a steaming cup of coffee sealed with a tight-fitting lid. She didn't hand it to him, no. She placed it gently on the bench beside him as she walked by and muttered to herself, "Guess the kitchen overdid it today." The old man looked at the bag, then back at her. His eyes didn't plead or rush, they just watched, cautious, hesitant, as if weighing whether this kindness was real or a trap. Then, slowly, he nodded again, a deeper nod this time. And just like that, an unspoken ritual was born. The very next day, he came back. So did the paper bag. And every morning thereafter, no words were exchanged, no names were spoken. Just a brown paper bag, a cup of coffee, and that quiet nod between two strangers bound by kindness. Why did Marisol do it? She never told anyone. Not a soul. Maybe it was something her father once told her about the war, the way children would scavenge crumbs beneath soldiers' boots. Or perhaps it was her own memory, that hungry child she once was, not caught in war, but trapped in the silence of a home too quiet after cancer stole her mother away. Or maybe it was as simple as this: he was hungry, and she knew how to bake. Word spread, as it always does. One Wednesday, as Marisol arranged fresh bagels on the display rack, she overheard a whisper near the coffee counter. "He's back again," a woman muttered, not loud enough to be rude, but just loud enough to be heard. "Marisol's running a charity now," a younger coworker joked sarcastically while wiping down the windowside booth. "Or do we just hand out free pastries to anyone who hasn't shaved in a month?" Marisol didn't respond. She just kept slicing warm loaves, her movements deliberate, as if each slice carried a quiet message no one else was ready to hear. A few days later, Mr. Raoul, a retired teacher who never missed his morning double espresso, glanced out the window and shook his head. "Back in my day, guys like that wouldn't dare hang around respectable shops. And no one handed out freebies just because someone looked pitiful." Marisol smiled politely but said nothing. Her hands never paused, dusting flour onto the next batch of rolls. Only Rosa, the elderly lottery vendor sitting 2 blocks down, leaned in close as she picked up her dripped coffee and whispered softly, "You've got your mama's heart." "Really? You know that?" Marisol paused, touched. Rosa had known her mother, the woman who made soup from leftovers and handed it to strangers during bitter winters. Marisol couldn't recall her mother's face clearly anymore, but she remembered those hands. Always warm, always busy, always smelling faintly of parsley and dish soap. Then, one morning, the old man didn't show up. Marisol still packed a bag, still brought out the coffee, and still placed it on the bench at exactly 6:10. But a gust of wind caught the napkin from the bag, sending it fluttering across the empty parking lot like a small flag with no country. She watched it drift, and her heart sank. The next day, no sign of him. And the day after that, silence remained. On the 4th day, Gustavo, the bakery owner, called Marisol into his cramped back office, the room smelling faintly of ink and burnt coffee grounds. He didn't waste any time. "Marisol, I know your heart's in the right place, but customers are talking. That man's making people uncomfortable." She gripped her apron tighter. "He's never come inside. Never asked for anything. But you keep giving him something every day. This isn't a soup kitchen." Marisol stayed silent, not because she lacked words, but because she might break down if she tried to speak. Finally, she whispered, "I pay for the food myself. It's leftovers. It doesn't come out of inventory." Gustavo sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Look, I'm not telling you to stop. Just, don't make it so obvious, alright? If you're gonna leave food, do it out back or something." She nodded, knowing the fight wasn't worth it. That night, she emptied the tip jar in her small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a loaf of bread, a coffee, and a muffin each day. She slipped the money into a plain white envelope and carefully wrote, "Covered 5 days' breakfast." No one would ever ask to see it. No one needed to. Because to Marisol, kindness didn't require permission, only intention. A week passed. The bench outside the bakery, where a brown paper bag and a steaming cup of coffee had always rested, now sat bare. For the first time in nearly 2 months, Marisol found herself preparing a breakfast with no one waiting for it. Still, she packed the bag at 6:10. Still, she placed it on the bench. Still, she watched from the window. But no one came. By Saturday, a strong desert wind knocked the "open" sign sideways. Marisol wrapped up the untouched meal and placed it in the fridge. She didn't need it. She couldn't throw it away, but she just couldn't leave it out there anymore. Was the world becoming too cold for kindness? Had she been invisible to the man she quietly cared for? These questions haunted her. And yet, in the quiet moments, she clung to hope, hope that somewhere, somehow, that small act of sharing bread meant something. Because sometimes, isn't it the smallest gestures that speak the loudest? The quietest kindness that carries the most weight? Who else but Marisol would have seen the silent struggle behind those tired eyes? Who else would have dared to give without asking anything in return? In a world that often demands explanations and conditions, Marisol gave freely, simply because she could. She baked bread. She poured coffee. She offered hope. And sometimes, that's enough to change a life. The emptiness weighed on Marisol's heart like a crushing silence that echoed through every corner of her small bakery. 10 long days had passed since she last saw the old man, her silent companion, the one who never asked for anything but accepted her humble gifts with a quiet dignity. And then, out of the blue, a message arrived from Rosa. A simple message, yet one that shattered the fragile peace she had clung to. Attached was a link to a Facebook post. Marisol clicked it, her stomach twisting as the image loaded, a photo taken from across the street, perfectly capturing her bakery, the empty bench, and the brown paper bag still sitting there, untouched and alone. The caption stung her like a bitter wind, Rosie's bakery now feeding imaginary customers. Guess good PR is more important than good sense. Could people really be so cruel? Did they not see the heart behind the gesture? But the comments, oh, the comments, they were far worse. Marketing stunt. Bet. She says it's for underprivileged folks and just tosses it. Feeding strays only creates more of them. Some people really need a reality check. Was this the world now? Quick to judge, slow to understand. Marisol locked her phone with a heavy sigh. She couldn't bear to read another word. That night, in the solitude of her small apartment above the bakery, Marisol sat down in front of her dresser and opened the lowest drawer, the one she never touched unless she needed strength. It held the last precious belongings of her mother. Inside, a worn but carefully kept silver tin box waited patiently. She unlatched it gently, as if awakening an old friend, and pulled out a battered leather-bound notebook, frayed at the edges, its loop strap faded with time. It was her mother's journal. Marisol flipped to a page she had read over and over as a child. The ink was faded, but the handwriting, steady, calm, patient, still spoke volumes. She read aloud in her mind, "Gave half my ration today to a little boy crying outside the fence. Some said I was crazy, that he could be a trap. But his eyes, they reminded me of myself the day my father didn't come home. No one grows poorer by sharing bread. But those who forget to share, no matter how full their tables, stay hungry in ways they'll never understand." Her finger traced the final line as if reaching out to touch her mother's spirit. What a powerful truth. Marisol didn't know the old man's name. She didn't know where he had gone or if she would ever see him again. But she didn't need to. He had been hungry, and she had still had bread to give. On the 11th morning since his disappearance, the sky was heavy and overcast, the damp chill unusual for Santa Isabel. Marisol was wiping down the pastry case when the sharp sound of tires crunching gravel caught her attention. Her heart skipped a beat as she glanced up to see 4 military SUVs, matte black, spotless, and perfectly aligned, pulling up right in front of the bakery. The synchronized arrival was like a scene from a movie. Heads turned toward the windows, breath held in silence. Even the espresso machine seemed to hush its usual hiss. Doors opened with soft clicks, and uniformed soldiers stepped out 2 by 2, movements crisp, rehearsed, and commanding. No words, just presence. Then, from the lead SUV, a tall man emerged. His face was weathered, tanned by sun and time, but carried an unshakable steadiness. His dark blue dress uniform was immaculate, adorned with ribbons and medals that caught the muted light filtering through the clouds. Every step he took toward the bakery was measured, deliberate. The bell above the door chimed loudly, unusually loud in the thick silence. Every person in the bakery turned as if caught in a spell. The room froze. "Is there a Marisol Rivera here?" the man asked, his voice calm but firm, cutting through the stillness. Marisol stood behind the counter, hands still damp from polishing glass, her throat dry and tight. "Yes," she whispered. The man approached with slow, purposeful steps. I'm Lieutenant Colonel David Santos, United States Army Special Forces. I'm here because of a promise. From the inside pocket of his uniform, he pulled a sealed envelope, thick, official-looking, carefully stamped and folded. This letter is from Ignacio Torres, the man you brought breakfast to each morning. Marisol's eyes widened, her hand reaching out for the counter to steady herself. She felt as if the floor might give way beneath her feet. Colonel Santos continued, he was the father of Sergeant Mateo Torres, one of my best men. Mateo was killed in action 2 months ago during an operation overseas. After that, Mr. Torres disappeared. A hush deeper than silence fell over the room. The weight of grief and guilt hung heavy in the air. He carried guilt, more than anyone ever knew. But 3 months ago, he wrote me, not about his grief, not about his son, but about you. The colonel lifted the envelope higher, as if presenting a sacred relic. In his final letter, written just days before he passed away from heart failure, he asked us to find the woman in the red apron. He said, you didn't ask questions. You didn't offer pity. You simply gave him food. Every morning, as if he mattered. Marisol was speechless. She barely breathed, caught in the enormity of the moment. The colonel's voice thickened, a tenderness breaking through his military reserve. She made me feel like a person again, like I was more than my sadness. Tell her she helped a father believe the world still had kindness left for the broken. With a steady hand, he stepped back, came to full attention, and rendered a formal salute. Outside, every soldier followed suit, standing tall in the open air, saluting the woman behind the glass counter of a humble bakery. Tears slipped silently down Marisol's cheeks. She hadn't saved a life or fought in a war. She had simply baked a roll, poured a cup of coffee, and offered them without asking why. And yet, somehow, that small act had found its way to a battlefield. It had wrapped itself around a soldier's memory, becoming part of a promise now being kept. Word spread quickly. Within 3 days, a photo of Marisol standing behind the counter, tears glistening in her eyes as uniformed soldiers saluted her, had traveled far beyond Santa Isabel. The local newspaper ran a story titled The Morning Ritual That Helped a Father Heal. Marisol didn't change a thing. She still opened the bakery at 5:30 a.m., wore the same red apron, and kneaded dough with the same quiet focus. But the people, oh, the people, they changed. A young mother walked in one morning, toddler in tow, and left a folded note on the counter that read, "My brother's a Marine. Thank you for remembering that soldiers leave families behind." An older man placed a challenge coin, a token exchanged among military units as a sign of respect, beside the register and simply nodded. Vietnam 74. First time I believed in people again. Some came not to buy bread, but to sit quietly, to leave patches, medals, handwritten prayers. Veterans. Widows. Children. Each carried a story, and somehow, a humble loaf of bread had given them permission to share it. Then, tucked among the thank you cards pinned to the wall, Marisol found a letter written in a child's handwriting. Dear Miss Marisol, I'm Lucia, Ignacio's granddaughter. We didn't know he was gone until someone from the base called. But Grandma said he always talked about you. Said you gave him food when no one else even saw him. We found a box under his bed with every napkin you folded, every little note you left on the bag. He never threw them away. Thank you for being kind when he needed it most. Love, Lucia. Marisol framed the letter and hung it behind the counter, not where everyone could see, but where she could find strength in it every day. A month later, Gustavo arrived early one morning holding a wooden sign. He didn't say much, just mounted it beneath the old bakery logo outside and dusted off his hands. The sign read, "Bread for those who need it." No questions, no shame. One crisp autumn morning, a teenage girl lingered outside before stepping in. Her hands were shoved deep inside her hoodie, her eyes wary and uncertain. "My dad's deployed," she mumbled. "My mom cries a lot. I just wanted to know if you still have any bread." Marisol smiled gently. "We've always got bread," she said softly. "And a seat, and coffee, and someone to listen if you want to talk." She placed a warm roll on the table, then walked away, just like she used to. That evening, while cleaning the back counter, Marisol found something left beside the flour bin. Another challenge coin, heavier than the first. Its inscription read, "Semper Fidelis, never forgotten." She slipped it into her pocket. Didn't ask who left it. Didn't need to. Outside, the sky glowed amber, casting a soft light across the bakery windows. Inside, the ovens hummed steadily, and a promise made not with words, but with breakfast, lived on. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way. Often in the quietest places, not everyone who helps wants recognition. Some just need to know that today, someone isn't going hungry. And sometimes, that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget this story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Reading this story fills me with a deep sense of hope and a reminder of the simple power of kindness in our lives. In a world that often feels rushed, judgmental, and disconnected, Marisol's quiet compassion stands out as a beacon of humanity. It's heartbreaking and infuriating at the same time to see how easily people jump to harsh conclusions, labeling generosity as marketing stunts or dismissing the hungry as strays. This cruelty reflects a societal impatience and lack of empathy that we desperately need to confront. What truly moves me is how Marisol's small act of baking bread and offering it without question became a lifeline for someone broken, a man carrying invisible burdens deeper than most can see. It reminds me that sometimes the most profound impact we can have isn't grand gestures or loud declarations, but the steady, unassuming acts of kindness done consistently. These acts ripple through communities in ways we can't always measure. Socially, this story challenges us to rethink how we treat the vulnerable and how quick we are to judge without understanding the full story. It urges us to cultivate patience, compassion, and humility. It also highlights the importance of recognizing those quiet heroes among us, the people who give without expectation, who feed not only the body but the soul. In today's world, where recognition and validation are often demanded, Marisol's story shows that true kindness seeks no reward. It simply exists to meet a need, no matter how small. I believe we all have the capacity to be that person who offers hope in the darkest moment. And maybe, just maybe, that's what will help heal the fractures in our society, one warm loaf and one open heart at a time. Subscribe to Heartfelt Gratitude Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.